With just 1 week until Election Day, the Trump and Biden campaigns are making their final pitches to voters in key battleground states. President Trump is campaigning in Michigan and Wisconsin, both states he won in 2016, but where recent polls show a close race. The president even got some help from First Lady Melania Trump Tuesday as she rallied supporters in Pennsylvania, a state that both campaigns are looking to win. The Biden campaign is focusing its attention on those states, too, as well as ones where Democrats are not traditionally competitive. The former VP stumped in Georgia Tuesday, and his running mate, Senator Kamala Harris, is set to visit Texas later this week. Meanwhile, former President Barack Obama was back on the campaign trail. He rallied support for Joe Biden in the perennial battleground of Florida and delivered sharp criticisms of his successor's handling of the coronavirus pandemic. The sprint to the finish line comes as at least 69 million Americans have already voted. Election officials in several states say those who have not already done so should vote in person, as ballots mailed in now may not arrive in time to be counted. Our coverage begins with CBS News White House correspondent Paula Reed.
Rising COVID cases in Michigan didn't stop thousands of supporters from cheering on the president in Lansing today, or the president from saying the pandemic is getting too much attention.
But here's the story. It's COVID, COVID, COVID. You can't watch anything else. On November 4th, you won't be hearing so much about it.
Despite evidence the president's handling of the virus has hurt him in the polls, he's down 8 according to the latest CBS Battleground tracker. The president continues to minimize COVID's impact.
Do you ever notice they don't use the word death, they use the word cases? Cases. Like Barron Trump is a case. He had sniffles. He was sniffling. 1 Kleenex, that's all he needed. One? How was it?
In her first solo campaign appearance this year in Pennsylvania, First Lady Melania Trump defended her husband's response to the virus.
While the president was taking decisive action to keep the American people safe, the Democrats were wasting American taxpayer dollars in a sham impeachment.
7 days out and down or tied in almost every swing state, the president is again sowing doubts about the outcome of the election, falsely claiming there are problems with mail-in ballots and calling for a final total on November 3rd. Twitter flagged that as misleading. An acting Department of Homeland Security Chief Chad Wolf told CBS News' Catherine Herridge the final tally will come in after Election Day.
I think the vast majority of Americans would like that result come election night. But we do know that certain states will continue to count some of their mail-in ballots for a couple of days after.
In Wisconsin, where Mr. Trump rallied tonight, the president's supporters echoed his concerns about mail-in voting.
We want to vote on Election Day. Just makes us feel better.
The U.S. Supreme Court ruled last night that all ballots in Wisconsin must be in by Election Day to be counted. But this opinion has some Democrats worried because in it, Trump-appointed Justice Brett Kavanaugh seemed to echo the president, saying that he was worried about, quote, chaos if ballots come in after November 3rd. And President Trump has said that he believes the Supreme Court may ultimately be asked to decide the outcome of the presidential election. Elaine.
Paula Reed, thank you. As we've been reporting, Joe Biden campaigned in Georgia Tuesday. It was the former vice president's first general election trip to the state. No Democrat has won there since Bill Clinton took the state's 16 electoral votes during his first run for office. But our latest CBS News Battleground tracker rates Georgia as a toss-up. And as Ed O'Keefe reports, Democrats believe the Peach State is now within striking distance.
Just by setting foot in Georgia, Joe Biden sent a message to President Trump today. Democrats think they can flip the state for the first time since 1992. In Warm Springs, where Franklin Delano Roosevelt once sought relief from the pains of polio, Biden said the country would recover from the current crisis.
This place, Warm Springs, is a reminder that though broken, each of us can be healed. That as a people and a country, we can overcome this devastating virus.
Next door in Florida, former President Obama was pumping up the crowd in Orlando.
Honk if you're fired up!
hoping to turn out Central Florida's Latino and suburban voters, the key to any statewide win.
We've got to turn out like never before, Orlando.
And he taunted his successor.
COVID, he's complaining. He's jealous of COVID's media coverage.
The former president also called out recent comments by Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, about black Americans.
President Trump's policies are the policies that can help people break out of the problems that they're complaining about, but he can't want them to be successful more than they want to be successful.
His son-in-law says black folks have to want to be successful. That's the problem. Who are these folks? What history books do they read?
The Biden campaign is courting black voters in a last-minute barrage of TV ads.
1,000 times again.
Outspending the president on TV by $12 million this week alone. Tonight in Atlanta, Biden said the African-American vote in Georgia could put him over the top.
It's time to stand up and take back our democracy. And any place we can do it, here in Georgia, we win Georgia, we win everything.
For more, let's bring in Caitlin Huey-Burns and Daniel Lippman. Caitlin is CBSN's political reporter, and Daniel is a reporter for Politico, covering the White House and Washington. Welcome to you both. Caitlin, Joe Biden visited Georgia Tuesday and will also stop in Iowa, Wisconsin, and Michigan. President Obama stumped for Biden in Florida, and Senator Kamala Harris campaigned in Nevada with a stop in Texas planned later this week. What does this all tell us about the campaign's focus in this final week?
Well, it tells us three things. First, they want to win back those states that narrowly went for Donald Trump in 2016, states like Michigan and Pennsylvania that went for Obama twice and then flipped over to Trump's side in 2016. Then they are aiming for redder states, places like Iowa. Obama won Iowa once, but now in 2016, it became a heavily Trump state. He won it overwhelmingly. Then the third thing they want to do is try to expand the map. So going to Georgia, where Democrats haven't won since Bill Clinton. This is a state where demographics are slowly but surely trending in the Democrats' favor. So this visit in the last week of the campaign signals that. That's what they're attempting to show, and where campaigns and candidates go and how they campaign is really intended to send a message on what they think their path to victory looks like. However, in 2016, Hillary Clinton went to places like Arizona in the final stretch and was criticized for not spending enough time in the Midwest, particularly in Wisconsin. The Biden team is hoping to kind of do both at once by going to places where Democrats traditionally don't win but see opportunities, but also paying close attention to places like Wisconsin, trying to win those states back.
So, Daniel, President Trump is campaigning in Michigan and Wisconsin Tuesday, and First Lady Melania Trump was in Pennsylvania. Those are all states the president did win in 2016, but our latest CBS News Battleground tracker shows all three leaning toward Joe Biden. So what's behind this shift? How is the Trump campaign trying to win back voters in those states?
Trump campaign and the president to define Joe Biden as a threat to the country and, as Beijing Biden or any of these terms just have not stuck like crooked Hillary did. And there's been a huge loss in support among seniors who now back Biden narrowly. They, backed Trump back in 2016. But because the virus really affects them the most in terms of lethality, that has made them much more open to Biden's message that this virus has to be taken seriously. And also suburban women and people who they look at their lives and they think, why isn't Trump properly addressing the pandemic? Why is his chief of staff basically waved the white flag and said, we're never going to control this virus? When in fact, most Americans want the government to at least try their hardest, and they don't feel like Trump has done that.
Well, Caitlin, Biden is also competitive in states that are normally viewed as Republican strongholds like Georgia, Texas, and Arizona. What's driving that?
Well, changing demographics in these states and people moving to areas from other states and really kind of changing the makeup of those states, and they're becoming increasingly competitive. Those states, some of them also have really competitive Senate races. So there's an incentive for the presidential ticket to campaign as well, or help drive voters on those down ballot races as well. That's been a message coming from the Biden campaign kind of from the beginning, that this is a candidate they believe who could help bring up some of those down ballot candidates. We'll see on Election Day whether those efforts paid off. Again, in 2016, they didn't. But the way in which Biden is campaigning is kind of designed as a contrast to Trump. The president is holding multiple rallies a day. That's very much in his style and kind of gives his campaign a feeling of momentum. The Biden campaign, however, has been arguing that the pandemic is still very much going on, and the limited schedule, they say, is kind of shows the contrast between the caution that they're taking compared to that of the Trump campaign. The Trump campaign's message is that the economy was good before the pandemic hit, and the pandemic, as you heard the president try to suggest, isn't as bad as people think it is. I can say that on the ground, we're seeing a partisan divide among voters themselves on how they're perceiving the pandemic itself and how they're perceiving the economy as well.
Well, Daniel, we heard Acting Secretary of Homeland Security Chad Wolf say in Paula's piece that the final vote count will come after Election Day. Now, the president has said that all votes must be counted by the end of Election Day. So what is the significance of this top cabinet official's break with the president on this?
I think Chad Wolf is just being honest with the American people, and that, you have elections that take a while to count all the ballots, and ballots that come in late or are provisional ballots where they have to kind of double check to make sure they're eligible to actually be included in the final tally. That's going to take a while, and so that's not bad for democracy. Of course, it would help people to not have as much uncertainty if there's a landslide one way or another, probably in Biden's favor, so that we all can know the election result by 2 a.m. or whatever on that Wednesday morning. But Chad Wolf is just basically stating the obvious, that we're not going to disenfranchise millions or hundreds of thousands of voters just because their ballot doesn't get counted immediately on Election Day itself. There's nothing in the Constitution that says if a ballot was not cast if it was not counted on Election Day, that doesn't mean that it should not be counted. That's ridiculous.
Right. That's a really important point there. And it is, as we know, something that traditionally happens not on Election Day itself, where you have these states certifying the final results. So, Daniel, you have Amy Coney Barrett, now officially a Supreme Court justice. How could a sixth conservative justice on the court impact potential election legal battles? And what does the president's rhetoric tell us about what those battles might involve?
Yeah, so those battles could be in terms of how to count ballots and which ballots to count in which states. And so remember, Bush v. Gore, that went to the Supreme Court, 5-4 decision in early December of 2000. And so this definitely has a precedent. But I don't think that, Amy Coney Barrett is going to make Trump president for another 4 years if, the majority of voters or the majority of electoral college votes say otherwise. And so I think it's kind of a academic argument right now, but definitely it's helpful timing to have a conservative justice on the court. And in terms of those election access law decisions, those definitely she could put an imprint, at least in a marginal way.
Well, Caitlin, the Supreme Court Monday rejected Wisconsin's attempt to extend the deadline for absentee ballots to be received. How significant is that?
It's significant because the reasons that ballots are often rejected have to do with signature checks and also receiving them past the deadline. That is hugely significant. In a state like Wisconsin, My colleague Adam Brewster and I have reported on why ballots are rejected, and we did an analysis that found in the primary about 2% almost of ballots were rejected for various reasons. That could make a difference in a really close race, especially if they're arriving past the deadline. In Wisconsin, during the primary, they extended the deadline for receiving ballots, and that allowed 80,000 votes to be counted because of that. So if you think about all these people who are voting for the first time in a different way than they had been before, voting by mail instead of voting in person, there's a learning curve associated with it. And making sure it's postmarked on time is part of that learning curve. And also, of course, concerns about the Postal Service being able to get those, all of those in on time. What I think we should tell our audience now is that since we're a week from Election Day, that if you haven't yet put your ballot in the mail, drop it off in person at your supervisor's office, at your county clerk's office, or in a secure drop box to make sure that it gets there in time to be counted. But this also shows how important these court decisions are when it comes to voting rights.
Well, Caitlin, you have been on the road. I saw your TikTok report. You're in North Carolina now. You were reporting on the road for TikTok with your producer, Sean, in the car. But that state is fascinating. It's a toss-up, according to our battleground tracker. North Carolina is already past 70% of its total 2016 turnout. There are also reports the Trump campaign is asking the Supreme Court to block a plan which would allow absentee ballots that arrive by November 12th to be counted, so long as they are postmarked by November 3rd. So with all that being said, I imagine there are some voters who are confused, but what are you actually seeing at these early voting locations, and what are you hearing from voters themselves?
Well, voters themselves have been telling us that they are wanting to vote in person early to make sure that their vote counts and to kind of get it done before Election Day. They've been really strategic about planning out their vote. It's really remarkable. I mean, there are several different apps in various counties where you can track how long the lines are, and early voting in North Carolina, which extends through October 31st, you don't have to vote in your precinct, you just have to vote in your county. So we were in Cary, North Carolina, where I talked to you earlier today outside of polling location, and election officials there are updating that data every half hour to make sure that people know how long the wait times are. And at that location, too, they started out with about 15 or 17 polling ballot boxes. Over the course of the week, they've added 15 more to help with the flow and help alleviate these long lines. So it's also important to note that while most Democrats have been voting early, we've talked to several supporters of the president as well here in North Carolina who say that they wanted to vote early and get their vote in.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns and Daniel Lippman, we really are in the home stretch now. Thank you both so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we will have full Election Day coverage next Tuesday. It begins at 7 a.m. Eastern with CBSN AM and continues throughout the day. Our election night coverage begins at 5 p.m. Eastern with a special edition of Red and Blue. We'll bring you the latest exit polls, results, and coverage from our CBS News teams across the country. That's all right here on CBSN.